1.5 years ago, I made a big decision in the camera industry. Well, it's not that big, but it is big to me, at least. I chose to stick with APS-C instead of going to full frame. I chose a smaller sensored camera, and this smaller sensor has its own pros and cons. In this video, I'll explain my thoughts on why you might choose APS-C over another smaller crop sensor or over full frame. But first, I think it's important to explain sensor size, however briefly. A camera sensor is a bunch of pixels crammed together into a small surface area, finite surface area. This little rectangle gathers light and concentrated by the lens and converts it into an image, at least roughly speaking. There are different size sensor formats such as APS-C, full frame, and micro four thirds. Smaller sensors such as APS-C and micro four thirds have less surface area, which means they gather less light than a full frame equivalent. This means they also have less room for pixels, meaning they try to shove more pixels into the smaller surface area to make them competitive with a larger sensor. This means the pixels are generally smaller, meaning they gather less light. These pixels are grouped together in millions of pixels, or megapixels, by the way. Smaller pixels gather less light than larger ones, meaning they gather less dynamic range. So large sensors, like full frame, gather more light and usually have much larger pixels than comparable smaller sensors. Okay, now that we got sensor size out of the way, let's move on to, well, my upgrade path for my old Sony ENIX5N. There was the Sony a6000 series cameras, which are APS-C, and there was the Sony a7 series cameras, which are full frame. From my explanation before, it probably seems obvious that full frame is superior because it gathers more light and it has a bigger sensor, so well, I should get the Sony a7 series cameras, but that's not the whole story. There's one big thing I haven't talked about yet, and that's price. Full frame camera bodies are expensive. Sony's highest end APS-C camera costs $1,200 currently, while its lowest end full frame camera costs about $1,800 to $2,000 depending on the sale. And the gap between APS-C and full frame camera bodies can definitely increase in terms of price, depending on which model you choose. But if the bigger sensor is that much better, then maybe the cost is justified. It's certainly better, but there's another factor here. Many people forget about glass, or lenses, when purchasing a camera body. Good glass ain't cheap, and full frame glass is expensive as heck. Remember that full frame glass has to concentrate more light over a larger sensor? Well, that means more glass, meaning more weight, meaning more cost. So full frame glass is more expensive and heavier than smaller sensored glass, meaning, well, that's why I decided to stick with APS-C instead. A slight loss in image quality by going with a smaller sensor meant a happier wallet and a happier back in the end, and I can still get great pictures with a smaller setup. You should go check out my Instagram. Just an FYI. So I picked up the Sony a6500 instead of an a7 III, and I still have it 1.5 years later, with plenty of great, cheap, lightweight lenses. I still look with envy to full frame for two main reasons though. Low light shooting and wide angle. The full frame a7 III has superb low light performance because of its bigger sensor, because it gathers more light. Perfect for things like astrophotography or other low light situations. Plus, the larger sensor makes wide angle shots a bit easier, another situation I definitely enjoy shooting in. But the cost and weight argument still outweighs these for me. It might not for you though, so keep this in mind before making your purchase decision. If cost isn't a concern, then full frame is incredible, but the extra weight it puts on your back and on your wallet has to be considered before making the plunge. APS-C is a great size that strikes a nice middle ground between performance and weight for enthusiasts like me and maybe you. But ultimately, who knows how long I'll resist the urge to join the glorious full frame party. Thanks for watching. See you next time.